everyone. Welcome to Ask the Experts Cloud Solution Building through a technical and business lens. I'm going to now invite Dale, Tejas, and Vinay on stage. So just mic on, cam on. And today is a very interactive session for everyone. So start asking your questions in the general chat or the QA feature. And we will take your questions as we go.
Thanks, Blake. Thanks for inviting us. And my name is Vinay. I'm excited to be here. I am CEO of Global Communication based in India, Bangalore. We have been a partner of Microsoft Cloud, and we have been building a lot of solutions around cloud. So I feel excited to be on this panel and answer any questions that you might have, both on the technical side of it as well as the business side of it, and also share this stage with Tejas and Dale. Hi, Tejas. Welcome. Hi there.
Hey, guys. Blake, thanks for the invite. It's a pleasure to be here. My name is Tejas Dixit. I work for Microsoft on the Azure data in product management. Been at Microsoft for a while. In between, I took about 7 years off and went and did a couple of startups. So very passionate about startup space, very passionate about helping startup founders and folks working within startups. So I'm very happy to be here in any way, form I can help. Would love to.
And hello, I'm Dale Davis-Jones. I am from IBM. I'm a distinguished engineer. I've spent all of my career at IBM, which is more than 25 years. For the past 10 plus years, I've been working with clients in the services part of our business, helping them on their cloud. I worked in server virtualization. I created offerings in that space. And I lead a wonderful international team of client-facing architects and other distinguished engineers like myself in helping clients on their journey to cloud. So really excited to be here with you. And congrats to all of you who took the time off this weekend to invest in continuous learning. It's one of my passions. And my other passion is to start startups. So I'll be checking you out, Tejas, for help there.
Sure.
Look right in. So if anyone has questions in the general chat, post them there or use the Q&A feature. So to get started, let's talk about where do you start? Like when you're wanting to start a business through any kind of cloud solution, like where does someone start? What's the baseline there? Vinay, do you want to take the first question?
Well, yeah, sure, Blake. See, one of the things that a lot of people think about cloud is that it's all about technology. It's all about getting my technology right and all of that. But one of the key things to start thinking is that what am I going to do before my launch, and how am I going to use cloud before the launch, and how am I going to use it once I launch it? So you need to be prepared during the two phases of your product engineering. You start with something smaller, right? This is my application, and if I have to scale my application when I go live, what is that I have to do? So these are the two things that you need to look at, and then architecture a cloud solution based upon your need. So everybody has different needs when it comes to cloud. You just have to figure out what's the right one. Are you going to use are you going to go a SaaS model? Are you going to use PaaS? Or are you going to use IaaS? It all depends upon the solution that they have. Yeah, somebody said it right. Start small and scale as you go.
Great advice. One of the other things I'd like to add to that, and it's a great question, Blake, so thanks for asking, is as you think about your reasons for moving to the cloud, really take the time to understand what your current environment looks like. If you're a startup, you may be lucky enough to be born in the cloud, so you don't have traditional infrastructure that you have to think about modernizing or refactoring to move to the cloud. If you have an existing business with existing servers, you may have to look at what you can lift and shift. And usually that's about a small percentage of your workloads. And then you need to think about application modernization for moving the rest. But if you're a startup, I'm sure Tejas can give us some more tips on what you need to do to think about selecting the right cloud and always be very, very cognizant of security, right? Making sure that security is a factor as you think of moving. Tejas, anything you wanted to add?
Yeah, no, I think I would agree with both Vinay and Dale. Your comments about, just in terms of just the overall guidance and how to think about it. The only thing I would add to it is you got to start. It's the best practice that at least I've seen both in startup as well as in the larger setups is you start with the customer. Figure out who your customer is, what is the breadth and depth of that customer, and what are you trying to serve, and what kind of needs of that customer you're trying to serve. Because if you kind of reverse engineer from there, then it translates to a few things, right? It translates to what cloud technologies you want to work. What is the level of, do you want to use a hybrid model? Do you want to use full SaaS? You want to use partial SaaS? You want to use IaaS? Like, for example, the general kind of, if you want to think about cloud, is you maximize the value of the cloud through the IaaS or infrastructure as a service component. You maximize the value of the app by using the PaaS components, so that you can build the right synergies, you can build the right balance between what you would use, but it always goes back to what are you actually trying to solve for, and what is the surface area of that problem or a customer requirement. So that's the only thing I would add to what Vinay and Dale mentioned.
Great, and so we had a question from the audience. What is the latest and greatest for making your cloud security the best it can be? What technologies are out there? How do you take it to the next level? And Tejas, we'll start with you.
Well, so I mean, from a security perspective, there obviously there are lots and lots of cloud services or cloud products that specifically focus on security. I would kind of start off with the at a platform level, and let me talk about Azure specifically. Security in general is becoming more and more ubiquitous, right? It is almost like table stake for anything that you deliver or offer from as a service from the cloud. And so if you think about Azure, security is prevalent across each and every part of our services. Whether you think about databases, we think about across cloud and on-prem as well as on the edge, the level of security, whether it's threat protection, whether it's identity and access, whether it's Active Directory, it is prevalent across these paradigms, whether it's edge, cloud, or on-prem. And so if you look at in hybrid infrastructure and you start thinking about things like Azure Arc, which not only kind of helps you drive that hybrid infrastructure, but actually makes the security pervasive across any place where your database is sitting, any place your data is sitting. And so I would kind of look at security from picking the right cloud service and making sure that the security is ubiquitous and pervasive across the services that you use within that cloud setup.
Dale, what about you?
I agree with what you said, Tejas. I'll also add, do be aware, and this comes back to Tejas's point about understanding your client. What are the not only the security requirements that you need to, what are your client security requirements, but also what are the regulatory compliances that you need to deal with? Because if you are in healthcare industry and HIPAA is a concern, that would drive additional security requirements. If you are in financial services, that will drive additional security requirements. The other thing you want to look at is data privacy. Identity and access management. We have a suite of security products within IBM. Okta is good if you're looking at open source. So there's, as Tejas said, there's a suite, but do look at security at the platform, identity and access management, data privacy and compliance compatibility, as in a holistic way as you're thinking about the security of your cloud.
Vinay, do you have anything to add?
Yes, as Tejas said, your security starts at your platform that you're building, right? One is that, the way you're building your platform itself is something that you first need to look at. And then, of course, all of the components that you're going to use to build your platform is something also that you need to look at. So one is at the infrastructure level and one is at the code level. So when you start thinking about it, as Dale said, like, you have certain compliance that you need to meet. For example, let's say you are building a web application. So it's a very simple thing that the OWASP has put up, saying that these are the top 10 threats that exist. And then you start checking out on each of the threats, saying that, okay, my platform is compliant to this threat. Like, I mean, I say that the DDoS attacks is not possible because I've already checked it, or I have checked for cross-site scripting. All of these kind of testing is need to be done at the platform level as well as the infrastructure level.
Great. Another question we have is, so cloud is for scaling. What performance testing of the solution is recommended by the panelist? And Dale, I'll let you take this one first.
Sorry, I missed your question. Can you repeat?
So cloud is for scaling. What performance testing of the solution is recommended by the panelist? So in terms of scaling, what performance testing do you recommend?
Okay, so let me run through. So there's performance and capacity management testing that you can run. One of the things that we look at is are you designing it with resiliency in mind? And the difference between resiliency and disaster recovery is typically there are folks who look at what are the, how would I respond if I had a loss? When I'm looking at resiliency testing, I'm looking at continuous availability. So if you're looking at your suite of testing for scalability, you're looking at things like response time. You're looking for things like latency. Those are a couple of the things that we would test for network latency. And that may determine things like where you place your workloads or where you ask your service provider to place your workloads. Tejas, anything you'd like to add to that?
No, I mean, I think from the parameters and the metrics that you would look at, I think I agree with you, Dale. One of the things I would add to it is there are two vectors to look at. I think one is just assuming that you've considered the requirements, where the scalability, the horizontal or the vertical scaling that's required based on what your app is doing and based on what customers they're serving. Assuming that you have right, I would kind of encourage you to follow the DevOps, regardless of how big and large your distribution of app is. Follow the DevOps processes, follow the CI/CD processes, because they are good practices. They are agile practices, and if you break it down in follow that methodology, or use, for example, Azure pipeline, then that way you will make sure that your testing of that solution from a scalability perspective is optimal, and you will apply that best practice for a smaller version change to a larger version change, but it will be a very standardized way of doing it. And so that's my recommendation, to right from get-go, try to apply those CI/CD and DevOps practices.
Vinay, do you have anything to add?
No, Blake, I think I just agree with Tejas that, setting up your process, especially in the DevOps, is very, very important. Otherwise, things can go wrong anytime. So that's all that I have to say. Yeah.
Great. So Vinay, this one's for you. How do you price your offering?
Well, that's a question that a founder has to answer, not me. I could, I could say that, how do you optimize cost on your cloud, and how do you price your product is up to you. How much of profits or how much of margins that you want to keep. But I would still suggest that look at your infrastructure in a lens that this is my application that's going to be in 5 years or probably 10 years once it is mature, because every product is not finished the day one. It evolves and evolves over the period of time. So your pricing also, you need to keep in mind that your pricing would not change just because, like, your technology stack is going to change or your infrastructure is going to change. So keep that buffer in your mind that while you're going in, you add that buffer saying that, okay, right now my infrastructure cost is probably 10% of the entire the expense that I have every month, or so even if it goes to 50%, I'm still making enough margins. So with that in mind, I would say that you need to price your product accordingly.
Dale and Tejas, do you have anything to add?
I mean, I would add, there is one other way of kind of thinking through. One is, you do a bottoms up. Obviously, you need to know your cost and everything else will go into that, fine Excel sheet to figure out your cost pricing models. But there is one, external parameter or barometer that you should kind of think. I've done that before, and it helps. One of the, for example, you look at Salesforce, right? Their Salesforce automation model or marketing. Salesforce is a good magnetic north to use to say, if I have a SaaS app that's serving a need, compare your app to a Salesforce SaaS app price point. And if you know that it's $54.99 is what they're selling that particular module for per user, then first of all, again, I'm generalizing it. You can't be charging more than that unless you're able to say that your value that your app provides is dramatically more than that. So that is one good kind of checkpoint that you can use. It has helped me at least to kind of think about, okay, well, my app does this. It's 20% the price of a Salesforce app. And then the next part of it is that I think about value. I break the value that I deliver to the customers in terms of these value accelerators and say, okay, well, this particular value accelerator, there is an appetite for customer to pay X% more. And then that way I can price those accelerators on the top of that base price I kind of calibrate myself to. So in good practice, it doesn't mean that that's the only way of doing it, but it makes it customer driven and competitive driven, so to speak.
Those are really good points, both of you, right? Starting with the cost. What's your cost? What is the value? What is the competition, right? Are you in a space where there is no one else yet? And what is the demand? So do a little bit of market research so you can price with what the market would bear. And do consider things like a trial, usage. And I really like what you said, Tejas, about accelerators, because that creates, the opportunity for tier pricing. There's a base price, you can go in at an entry point that anyone would take, and then you can always stack on top of that to add value-added services. Good.
Great. So the next question is regarding identity and access management. How open is the market for incorporating machine learning and AI for adaptive user authentication for cloud applications?
So I actually just spent quite a bit of time on that, and I would say, and I want to make sure I understand the question, so please feel free to ask a follow-on. In terms of the market from a client perspective and regulators, there's definitely a demand for AI integration with identity and access management. I was just working on a project with a team, and we were looking at what are our opportunities for providing a service that did bias detection, right? And we're open sourcing it for inclusive language in IT. And in working with our CISO and our BISO, right? That's the Chief Information Security Officer, and our Business Information Security Officer. One of the things that we talked about was identity and access management, and how do we ensure that trolls aren't coming in to contribute language that is being coded as non-inclusive, which is really inclusive. So one of the things we looked at is what are the what exists there, and as Teja said, there's a lot of products there. But then the second thing was what are the parameters of fairness, right? But you're looking at AI intelligence to link to your identity and authentication solutions. So good pluses are APIs, API integration support sets. There's a lot of work depending on the AI solution that you're selecting. It's a broad question, so I'd like to probe with you to make sure I'm answering it, or if Tejas or Vinay have anything else that they'd like to add.
I think the one thing that I would add is, identity and access management obviously is there are so many different components to it. I think role-based access control is one critical authorization aspect which comes into play when we talk about providing access to specific users into the environment. But I think to answer the question a little bit broadly, I think there is appetite for machine learning and AI in specific industry. I think enterprise at an end app level, the appetite is kind of beginning, but it's probably not as much. But when you think about retail space, when you think about call centers, you think about these applications, I think there is general the hesitation to indulge is becoming lesser and lesser as we go on. I feel very comfortable in actually talking to a robot or a conversational AI kind of a system behind this thing, and I don't feel awkward providing, or I don't fear providing my information there. So I think there are some industries that have been more adaptive, but if you think about enterprise level and where the PI and your user information, like regulated industry, I think there is still a little bit of hesitancy. So I think it depends, but the technology is there within the clouds for all aspects of security.
And if you want to explore this space a little bit, we have some solutions we've been building in IBM around AI 360 fairness solutions. So you might want to check that out as well, if that would be of use. But I agree, there is, I would say, mixed level of openness for the use of AI in identity and access management.
Vinay, do you have anything to add here?
No, not much of like identity and access per se. So not much aware of it. Yeah.
So the next question is, where and how should our organization consume cloud computing services? Vinay, you want to take it?
Okay. So it depends particularly where your organization is. Like, already if your organization exists and then you're already on a on-premise system, you would probably see how do you want to move to cloud or migrate to cloud and then start building solutions there. And probably you can start with a hybrid model where you can do a hybrid IT where you have part of it in the cloud and then part of it as in on-premise infrastructure. But if you're a upcoming promising startup and then you want to innovate, so you're born on cloud and then you can start innovating on cloud. It's going to be much easier, much cheaper way of doing it, and also it's a much faster way of hitting to the market as well. So it totally depends upon where your organization is at the current stage, but a lot of people do think that cloud is for only technology-based companies, and that's totally incorrect. Think of even companies who are into manufacturing, companies who are a small scale industries who are producing probably let's say a phone cover or anything. All of those companies do need power of cloud and power of cloud computing. So right, the stages are that you migrate to cloud or you are born in cloud. The choice is there. So it depends on the stage of the startup or enterprise.
Gail?
Agreed. And I would add that if you are looking to increase the agility of your business, if you would like to disrupt the way you work and modernize, radically simplify, cloud is definitely something you would want to tap into. Remember what Vinay said at the beginning. Start small. Remember what Tejas said. Be intentional about what you want to achieve, right, from moving to the cloud, and then really be considerate of what is the value you hope to derive, and understand your workloads with the help of a provider, so you get the most out of it. And then a big part of it we didn't talk about is the people and the culture. Moving to the cloud is not just getting into modern workspaces, getting rid of data centers or physical servers. It is a whole change in how you look at things. You want to be modern, you want to be agile, you want to be responsive, and you want to continuously think of innovating and moving that mindset back into your mainstream organization. If you're born in the cloud, then obviously that you don't have to worry about the legacy, but you do want to continuously think about what is the value, what are you getting out of it, and then how do you ensure that you're set up well for scale. Tejas?
Yeah, no, I mean, well articulated, Dale. I think you covered all kind of the stitched up kind of sort of a journey that one should think about. I think the only thing I would add is there is, when you're, again, if you think about it from a customer perspective, think about where does that app reside? And the simplistic way to think about it is that your app could actually reside in many cases sometimes on a client tenant, on your customer tenant, which means that, if whatever cloud they might have an AWS, they might have an Azure, they might have an IBM, but you got to be cognizant about the fact that your app will need to reside in a customer environment, and that will drive some specific investments and approaches that you would take in that, like containerization and some of the other things related to that. If your app is sitting on your own tenant, it's 100% SaaS app. Doesn't matter whether it's single tenant, multi-tenant, but it's sitting and you have 100% control. It will drive your strategy in a different way. And so that is also one of the key things that you should pick up and identify where your app
Great.
sits.
And one more question before we go into final thoughts. How does cloud computing factor into our application strategy and architecture? Tejas, yeah.
Sorry. No, say that again. I'm trying to track what the question is.
How does cloud computing factor into our application strategy and architecture?
I mean, I would go back to saying what I initially said. I think the value from the cloud comes from the right investments at the infrastructure as a service layer, which basically means that you have the right scaling mapped. You use the right infrastructure as a service components, whether it's virtual machines, whether it's load balancing, whether it's pipelines. Get the fundamentals right at the IaaS level that gives you value from the cloud. At the app level, you got to start thinking about value that you would get from PaaS, which is how do you maximize the value within the application is through PaaS layers. And what I mean by that is that having the right, using the right services, or right set of services, using the right set of microservices, using serverless computing, using I'll take an example. If your application is analytics intensive, then you have an option to, let's say, it uses some neural network, some regression analysis, some kind of a attribution modeling, whole bunch of different complex algorithm. So you have to make a decision saying, okay, I can actually write that algorithm myself, or I can actually rely on the cloud capabilities, the microservices and the services that the cloud offers to use those algorithms. There is benefit in both, but the bigger benefit of using a cloud-based algorithm or cloud capability or service is you don't have to worry about maintaining it. And so you would make those decisions based on, I would say, those pivots and those kind of vectors. But generally speaking, I think maximize your app using PaaS, maximize the value of the cloud using IaaS.
Okay, and I agree, and I would add from an architecture perspective, a couple of things. One, always have an overview of your enterprise architecture, understanding that you're going to have applications that are focused on, let's say, consumer services, microservices. Understand the roles that will be interacting, that do or will be interacting with the applications. And what I mean by roles are your end users, your developers, your security teams, your data ops, if that's needed. And then think about your orchestration, right? Workflow automation, how do things get provisioned? And always have as cross-cutting themes your data management, AI, and automation, because that goes with cloud. And then be very aware in your overall architecture design of whether what you're using is, and we didn't get into this a lot, public, private, hybrid. And hybrid cloud will come into play if you already had legacy infrastructure or traditional infrastructure you were dealing with. So if you think about that, I think that gives you sort of like the overall view. And then you always, we're talking about building solutions, you want to make sure that you understand the business requirements. What are the functional and non-functional requirements? This is, from an architectural perspective. And then how are you going to leverage the different aspects of your architecture to get the value you want, bearing in mind what kind of response time you need, what kind of security, and also from a data center strategy, what kinds of latency you can afford with the solution. And that sort of gives you the big picture of most of the things you need to consider. Hopefully that helps.
Vinny,
And don't forget containerization and your container strategy versus your other virtualization strategies you might be using.
It's definitely a much bigger world than 30 minutes. So just one more question. How are cloud providers coping with the Internet of Things in a BYOD at scale during the pandemic? So let me rephrase that actually, sorry. How are cloud providers coping with the Internet of Things in a BYOD environment at scale that the pandemic has brought in?
Right.
I think you can go first. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Dale.
Okay, I'll start with BYOD, and I'll start with us because it's actually a strategy that we were on, and in my world, in our company IBM, BYOD was a strategy that we deployed and implemented several years ago. So I would say the biggest change for us during the pandemic with respect to that was making sure that everybody was being a lot more rigorous and having people register their own devices, and by people I mean employees, than ever before. Not that we weren't required to, but upping our enterprise endpoint detection services to determine that their endpoints that are being accessed by devices that are not configured for our enterprise network. And we use Mass 360, 1Password. So those are some of the kinds of things we use to ensure that those types of security measures and network detection techniques are used to ensure that we aren't going to have breaches. So I would say that was the one biggest response to the pandemic, because as you know, the more people that were in the net online, and that's a big shift that happened from working remote or learning remote, the more we saw threats from the malactors, right, in trying to penetrate people's environments. So your end user device that you might have just used for your personal use that you now are linking to your company's network might be shared by somebody who is, going to school, online. And so that's one of the reasons we crack down a lot. So we really, in our case, and for many of our clients, we really emphasized endpoint detection and secure and really advanced security measures to get there. Or while 3-year-old, as Heidi said.
Vinay,
Any other
yes?
points?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
I think the work is not just on the laptops anymore. Like the phones that we use are also like we are using for work, right? So it's like when it becomes BYOD, your phones are also part of it. So think of it this way, right? Like all of the cloud providers that could be like that could be M365 or it could be G Suite. All of them have put in a lot of thought process into the security aspect of it when it comes to how the data is handled, the first one, and then also the scale of it. Like how can you scale your organization while you use the cloud. For example, let's say I have an employee who leaves the organization. I can wipe his email on the phone as well as on the computer in no matter within the about like few seconds, and all of these things would do help us in keeping the data secure.
One other thing we did that just occurred to me, and that you might want to do if you're not doing it already, is we also ran very focused education around this. So we have annual cybersecurity training plus other training on cybersecurity during the year, and it's required for all employees because we've been using BYOD. So I work from my mobile device. I access our network through the phone and my laptop. But the other thing we had, right, and I think this is why the person asked about the Internet of Things, and I'm just connecting the dots, is you might have had your own network at home where you have your Apple TV, your home security, and one of the things they gave us was specific instructions and guidelines on how do you not only secure the devices that connect directly into the IBM, in our case, network, but how do those devices talk to your other devices, and how do you secure all of those as well? So really not just looking at your the endpoints into your company's network, but the other IoT devices in your home network, and how do you secure them, isolate them, and there were some really good practices. If Blake, I can send you a link, because I think we also made it possible for us not just to learn internally, but to share it with our family members as well. Really good tips for everybody.
Great. And Tedros, do you have anything to add?
No, nothing major other than the fact that I think overall the multi-factor authentication and the frequency of security or password changes that need to happen, I think has become a little bit more regimented in general, because for the right reasons. And I think the investment that companies are doing, like Microsoft invests about $1 billion every year on cybersecurity. I'm sure IBM does, at the same levels. I think that has become super critical, because the threat protection and the end-level security for devices that are connected to the network, whether you brought that device yourself or a company device, it actually subscribes to the air cover that the cybersecurity investments offer, and they get subscribed at individual device level, that get subscribed to the entire cloud infrastructure level. And so those are becoming just more and more important, and these investments by companies like Microsoft or IBM and others are super,
Great. So
critical.
before we close, do either any of you have final thoughts on this industry, or any last minute words of advice to everyone? I'll give you like 5 seconds to think about it, and then Dale, I'll let you start.
Okay. All right. I think I had made some notes about it, so I want to make sure I don't want to be redundant. So let's see, what were my notes I made? Okay. All right, I found it. Okay. So I had a few things. One, agile is not a synonym for ad hoc. So while it is critical to the success of your business as you move into the cloud, do consider really understanding how to leverage it and implement it in a structured way that you get the most out of it. Second, take care of the hygiene of your environment, whether you're born in the cloud or you are in a hybrid cloud with traditional and new cloud infrastructure. Keep your applications and your infrastructure current, right, at the right level. That's just good health and hygiene for your environment. Be security aware as you are moving, as you're working in a cloud environment, moving workloads, and do hold your cloud service provider accountable for being security aware and securing your workloads. The last thing I would leave you with is your decision to use cloud services to move your workload to the cloud is really dependent on what you want to get out of it, what you want to get out, give to your clients. So be really intentional in your design, your requirements, and make sure your provider understands it, whatever cloud provider you're working with, and be cognizant of the fact that you may need more than one cloud provider to get all of your, the benefits that you need, and that's okay. But do ensure, whether it's one cloud or multiple, that you have a resilient resiliency built into your design. So those are my last parting words for everybody.
Yeah, now I'm trying to figure out what I should not repeat, right? Yeah, let's cover some of them. No, I would say a few things. I think take a customer-centric approach to start off with. I think that is the best way. If you ground yourself, your app, your product fit, your market fit, essentially around the notion of customers that you serve, 9 out of 10 times you're going to make the right decisions that are required to be made on the technology side. So start with the customer. That's probably one. Second is, I'm multi-cloud. I agree with Dale that there are some cases where multi-cloud is important. I feel that multi-cloud is extremely expensive and extremely time-consuming. And so it doesn't matter what cloud you go. Again, if you want to go, you want to get the right value out of the infrastructure as a service and platform as a service, go and try to kind of double down and bet on a cloud. I would love to have you bet on Azure, but again, as what you want to bet on the right cloud. And then the last one I would say is, I would just kind of reinforce what Dale said, which is, start small, but get into the practice of implementing Agile or DevOps or CI/CD kind of practices, regardless of how small or how large your app is. Because if you start small with implementing those practices, it will serve you really well when your development and software needs increase. And so those are 3 things I would probably kind of land with you guys, and hopefully it makes sense.
Vinay?
Yeah. So since Tejas and Dale has covered most of it, so I just wanted to stress up on the fact that cloud is the backbone of innovation, right? Just for the fact that we are all connected here on remote platform is because of cloud. And also, just think about the amount of apps that we use on a daily basis for the last probably 5 to 8 years that we have been using, starting from Canva to all of the modern applications that we use. That is all possible because of the cloud. But again, as Tejas and Dale said, be extremely customer focused and customer centric while you choose the cloud, and I'm sure it's going to be a success for you and your enterprise or your startup.
Great. Well, that concludes our session. I'd like to thank all of you again for taking your time to answer any questions. And as attendees, if you have any additional questions or would like to get introduced to the speakers, just go to womenincloud.com/get-introduce, and you can connect with them offline. And we're going to go back to the floor, and that concludes it. Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Thanks.
Have a great day.
Thanks,
Thanks for having
Tejas. Thanks, Blake.
Bye.
Bye-bye.